Jason Arday, who was Cambridge University's youngest black professor ever, has been found dead a week after he resigned amid plagiarism allegations. Investigators say the circumstances of the 41-year-old's death do not appear to be suspicious. The BBC's Helena Wilkinson has the very latest.
3 years ago, Jason Arday made history, becoming Cambridge University's youngest ever black professor. But earlier this month, he was at the centre of a plagiarism row. And last week, he quit his role with immediate effect. Tonight, it's been confirmed that Professor Jason Arday has been found dead. In a statement, the Metropolitan Police said they were called by the London Ambulance Service this afternoon following a report that a man had been found unresponsive inside a property. Sadly, a 41-year-old man was pronounced dead at the scene. His next of kin have been informed and are being supported by officers.
When Jason Arday was appointed the youngest black professor in the history of the University of Cambridge, it was a big public moment. This man had overcome so many challenges to reach that academic summit. As he gave interviews about his achievement, the new professor voiced some frustration that he had also become a standard bearer.
For me, a victory from all of this would be for this to be the last headline about being the youngest ever black whatever. I mean, it's not a redundant point, it's a very important point given the dearth of black and ethnic minority people in higher education, full stop, particularly in institutions such as Cambridge and Oxford. But I think the actual more salient point is actually that this shouldn't be a headline in a couple of years' time.
Concerns that Professor Arday had been guilty of plagiarism in the preparation of his doctoral thesis were raised soon after he began work at Cambridge. Earlier this month, the university announced that it had begun an investigation following new information about his academic qualifications, and he resigned soon after. In a statement, he said, "I no longer wish to feel as though I'm living under a constant spotlight, where every aspect of my life is subject to public examination and judgment." His resignation, he said, was simply the decision of someone who has reached the limits of what any person should reasonably be expected to endure. Other parts of Arday's life had come under scrutiny. Claims he'd made about marathons he'd run for charity and the amount of money he'd raised. Tonight, Jason Arday's family described a campaign of misinformation which was too much for Jason, who was a gentleman who always wanted to see the best in everyone. "We are in shock," they said, "to have lost this amazing father, partner, brother, uncle and son."
Hey guys, my name is Modi and welcome back to Modi Speaks. Guys, I'm going to be very compassionate in today's video because it involves the loss of a person's life. Because I also believe that no matter the consequences, a person's life is very precious. We should never ever rejoice at anybody's death, especially somebody who was not accused of committing a violent crime, right? Yes, I agree that deception is wrong, plagiarism is wrong, living a false life is wrong. But at the end of the day, we still have to tap into our basic compassion as human beings when somebody loses their life. I don't know how many of you have been following the story of Jason Arday, but I hope that the introductory clip was able to give you some basic information on the story. So a few years ago, this man was appointed a professor at the University of Cambridge, and he was celebrated across the media as the youngest black professor in the university's history. It was treated like a historic achievement, a historic breakthrough, okay, a diversity triumph, proof that barriers were being smashed. Cambridge and the press lauded him with praise and worship, and he was paraded as an extraordinary achievement. Now, fast forward to recent weeks, right? Serious accusations of plagiarism were levied against this man. People examined his academic work and found large sections that looked copied or very closely matched earlier work done by other scholars. And on top of that, there was serious allegations about the authenticity of large parts of his academic records and claims about his life and achievements. Now, following that, series of investigations were launched against him, and despite him denying all of those allegations, he resigned from his position last week. Then yesterday, the news broke that he had been found dead in his home in the UK. Police said that the death was unexpected but not believed to be suspicious because there was no signs of foul play, which left people like me reasonably wondering whether this man took his own life under the weight of public exposure and shame. In fact, I think that is exactly what happened here, right? Because according to The Independent, hours before he was found dead, Arday sent a voice note to his friend in which he said he felt like he couldn't go on. He couldn't go on. Plus, nothing suggests to the police that his death was suspicious or inflicted by an external individual. Now, personally, I feel genuine sorrow for how this story ended. I believe it is always wrong to take your own life. I mean, everything can still be fixed if only one is willing to admit one's wrong and, willing to do the work towards redeeming oneself. It is better to apologize if you are guilty or to defend yourself and stand your ground if you are not guilty than to end it all. I believe nobody is beyond redemption. Everybody can be forgiven, and suicide is never the answer to situations like this. So I feel really sorry for how this story ended. Truly, a man is dead. A family has lost their son. His family is left dealing with the aftermath. That is very tragic, full stop. I am not happy he died. No decent person should ever be happy that he died, but we also cannot overlook how we got here. Unmerited elevation. This is what unmerited elevation can do. For the sake of DEI and affirmative action, institutions and the media lifted this man into a position that did not match the evidence of his record. They praised him beyond what the work he has done justified. They made him a symbol. They put him on a pedestal so they could signal to the world how progressive and how inclusive they really were. Cambridge used him as a DEI tool. The hiring process was shaped by diversity pressures. Reports have shown that the department took advice from equality and inclusion groups focused on increasing Black and ethnic minority staff in Cambridge University. The job advert itself flagged underrepresentation of certain groups. The bar for a senior professorship at one of the world's top universities was treated differently simply because of the identity box that needed to be ticked. Now, Jason Arday was elevated faster and higher than a pure merit process would likely have allowed. But then, when the problems of their DEI appointment surfaced, the same institution, Cambridge, that chaired the appointment suddenly had to investigate the very person they had held up as proof of progress. That is the core problem with this kind of preferential treatment. It does not just lower standards in the abstract, okay? It puts real people into roles they are not fully prepared for and then surrounds them with praise that feeds their delusion. After a while, these people are going to start believing the story being told about them. The institution gets its virtue points. The media gets its feel-good narrative. Everybody looks good for a while until the reality hits, like what we just saw in the case of Jason Arday. And this is why people like me will always push back against DEI practices that hand people positions, titles, and public acclaim that they haven't actually earned on the same standards applied to everyone else. Much of this tragedy could have been avoided if the appointment and the surrounding hype had been grounded strictly in demonstrated merit and transparent verification. Had the focus stayed on truth and ability rather than on checking a diversity box and generating good headlines, the entire trajectory might have been different for this story. A person who stays within the bounds of what they have actually achieved is far less likely to face this kind of catastrophic public reckoning. But no, DEI must be upheld. And now, look where it has landed Mr. Arday. So guys, I think this incident should be a cautionary tale to every individual. Stick to the truth about your abilities. Do not let flattery or a nonsensical ideology like affirmative action entice you into claiming more than you can defend. It is time for the big institutions and media outlets obsessed with virtue signaling to stop propping people up on pedestals they did not earn, just so these institutions can look good. Because when that pedestal eventually collapses, real human beings get hurt. Cambridge and places like it need to remember that their first job is academic standards. not social engineering. They also need to understand that preferential treatments that ignore or downplay competence do not help the people they claim to lift. They set them up for failure and public shame, and sometimes suicide when the truth comes out. Jason Arday's family has lost a life. They have lost a father, a partner, a brother, a son. So despite everything, I still understand that the loss of life can be very devastating. So I suggest our response to this tragedy be grief for the family and a clear-eyed look at the system that helped produce this outcome. Guys, merit, honesty, and rigorous standards are not the enemies of fairness. They are the only foundation that protects both individuals and institutions from exactly this kind of collapse. This is an unfortunate situation, I understand, and I agree. I wish strength to his family, and I hope that people in positions of power finally understand that elevating somebody beyond what the evidence supports is not in fact an act of kindness. It is just a setup. So stick to the truth of a person's abilities and record. That is how you keep people alive, and that is how you keep institutions honest. But as always, guys, these are my thoughts and my opinions. Please feel free to share yours in the comment section below, but do so respectfully. Also, if you're not subscribed to this channel, honestly, I don't know what you're waiting for. Subscribe to the channel. Like and share this video to keep people informed, and consider joining my membership or buying me a coffee if you can, as a way of supporting the channel. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you on the next one. For now, peace.